Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Brianna Mihalovich, and I am the Professional Development Coordinator here at Campus Compact. We are so excited about our partnership with the Academy of Community Engagement Scholarship as co-creators of this series. ACES is an organization that recognizes exceptional leaders who live at the intersection of academics and communities to benefit society. Together, we bring you this series on addressing wicked issues through community engaged scholarship. This year, our series is focusing on our climate and our health, exploring the impacts of climate change on health and how higher education can make a difference. Leading the charge in this conversation is Campus Compact's Design Fellow, Rebecca Forsythe. And before I hand things off to Rebecca, I do want to highlight some other ways that you can get involved with Campus Compact. If you're interested in Campus Compact's professional development offerings, I'll drop a link in the chat where you can learn more about our upcoming programs and events. And you can also contact us at our email, and I will get those in the chat momentarily. But I will go ahead and pass things off to Rebecca.
Hi, folks. Thank you all for coming to our third session in our Wicked Issues series on climate change and health. I apologize if I'm a little spotty. I am coming from the Colorado foothills, and if you know anything about Wi-Fi there, it is not good. So we'll bear with me. But we have a great third panel coming here. So we're going to be focused on community engaged teaching and learning. And so we have some panelists that are going to share their expertise on how they utilize the classroom and community engagement for facilitating the learning process around the effects of climate change and health. So our panelists include Dr. Michelle Garvey and Dr. Angelica Walton, both coming from University of Minnesota. But Dr. Michelle Garvey, you're coming from Twin Cities. Are you also Dr. Walton? Yes. Okay, yeah. Cool. Awesome. So starting this off, I'm just wondering if you can give us and attendees a brief description of who you are and how your work relates to the intersection of climate change and health in particular. Either of you can.
Yeah, happy to start us off, Michelle, and we'll have to connect because we haven't had the opportunity to do so yet. So happy to be here with all of you who are on the call. My name is Dr. Angelica Walton. I go by she, they pronouns. I'm a clinical assistant professor in the School of Nursing, and I am also the director of our Center for Planetary Health and Environmental Justice. I also recently started sitting as the Director of Research and Scholarship for the Global North American Planetary Health Alliance. And how I came into this work, the work that we do, it's so holistic and so robust. And I just kind of gave you a description of titles that maybe give some insight to the work that we do. But really at the root of it for me is I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse, and nurses work at the intersection of many disciplines. They're largest of the workforce of healthcare professionals, and we're really on the ground with patients and communities and families, and often the bridge between medical jargon with the realities of people in their environments and the lives that patients are experiencing. And so we've really been catalyzing this movement of planetary health within nursing because of just that, because of the role that nurses play as really truly systems thinkers by trade, constantly having to assess all of the potential risk and exposures, whether it's environmental, biological, cultural, social, and then kind of shape shifting those dynamics into the most optimal conditions for healing to happen in full partnership with those patients and families that we're caring for. And so at the root of that practice is really understanding the important role of healing in this climate work. And that is why we kind of live under that planetary health umbrella, which emphasizes that importance of, returning to our innate interrelationship, interbeing with nature, shifting out of that anthropocentric mindset or hierarchy back into an ecocentric hierarchy, one within instead of one of above. And so it's this social paradigm shifting that we're really focusing on right now. And I'll kind of stop there because we'll keep getting into the details on that. And I'll pass it to Michelle.
Cool. That all sounds great, Angelica. Good to meet you. And hi, everybody. Thanks for having me to Campus Compact. My name is Michelle Garvey. I use she, her pronouns, and yeah, I'm a lecturer in sustainability studies at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where I've always specialized in environmental justice and all of its interrelated fields like climate justice, food justice, water justice, reproductive justice. Um, and I also have been spending a lot of time, even more time lately, as a curriculum author with Native Son Community Power Development. We're working on building a K-12 curriculum that braids Ojibwe culture, Anishinaabe language, and climate politics and like climate justice movement history with change-making strategies for kids. And we want this program to exist all over Anishinaabe territory. So we're steadily building this program and yeah, kind of trying to live out that vision for the people before they enter the university or the college level. And I guess my work relates to the intersection of climate change and health through environmental justice, which has always been about the health of people and cultures and ecologies. It was the movement, if we're talking about environmental justice in a contemporary sense, because environmental justice has been practiced by people for a lot longer than the modern movement in like the 1970s and beyond. But this was the movement in a contemporary sense that first recognized that land harm is human harm and vice versa. So, of course, climate justice and health justice are deeply aligned with that perspective, I think. Um, but the scale is different, right? When we're talking about climate justice is a banner that involves global alliances and coalitions. So I think the alignment really exists in terms of um, our concern for the ability of every living thing to thrive in their ecological common, whether we're talking about the commons as the atmosphere, the land, or the water. So I think that's where I can stop for my introduction.
Amazing. Thank you guys. And as we know, um, we are kind of focused specifically on community engaged teaching for this session. So I do want to ask, what is your kind of experience with teaching, especially around this kind of topic, and how do you approach community engaged teaching learning?
Yeah, I can start and then Michelle can build and maybe there will be more to add after that because there's so many creative ways that this is emerging. I'll say one, for example, is really service learning. Historically, I've talked about nursing and I'll talk about other interprofessional disciplines as well, because that's really a big focus of this community teaching and learning. But historically, nurses have been in the community and with the people, and once upon a time, more focused on public health, preventative measures, health promotion, quality of life, doing neighborhood visits, home visits, and some nations and cultures are still doing this. And over the course of time, we have collectively, as a society, experienced this pretty severe disembodiment crisis, right? Where we've kind of lost that relationship with ways of knowing that do promote healthier, more balanced quality of life. And everything's kind of been institutionalized and capitalized upon. And because of innovations, because of colonization, because of many, many factors as to how we got here. And so even a practice like nursing or a discipline like nursing and medicine, social work, has been very institutionalized as well, right? There's a lot of the workforce going into acute care systems, and these acute care systems are collapsing in on themselves right now because our society is so sick. There's so many comorbidities that it has become unmanageable to kind of keep up with. And so right now, for us, because of that collapse and that reality, especially post-COVID, there's an opportunity to redesign and rethink everything, right? Get back to the community, get back to learning skills with the people. We don't have to be within acute health system to learn how to do a health assessment, to learn how to talk to people, or to teach our students how to talk to people, how to socially and environmentally scan what's going on, to explore cultural loss with people to better understand the root causes of the diseases that they may be experiencing and the imbalances. And so we're doing a lot more service learning. We're looking for opportunities to partner with multiple disciplines, get nurses in the field with farmers and nutritionists and yoga teachers and economists and engineers, and we want them in all of the different spaces that are much more upstream. And some examples of that, we lead these eco-health immersion experiences out of the university, which is an interprofessional learning experience, where we're kind of taking that community engaged teaching and learning concept beyond just people and seeing community as the many beings that are here to teach us, right? If we think about who our best teachers are on this earth, it isn't humans. Humans are of the youngest of, 8 billion species that hold wisdom and knowledge about leadership, about care, about reciprocity, about mutual aid, ways of being together. And so I'm so inspired and like hopeful that this collective awakening of that has become quite a bit more normalized within, I think, all of the health disciplines. And so we take these students out to we have a few university biological stations. One is in Lake Itasca, up where the Mississippi River headwaters are, and they're experiencing the knowledge that they're taking in from the land, from the indigenous and tribal teachers that are available to be there for that experience, from the natural resources department. And then they're working together to try to strategize what would a more regenerative health system look like. And so we're trying to find those creative opportunities for students to be really in and with the community, and not just the people, but also the land. And I'll stop there. There's a list of other examples, but I want to give Michelle some space to share about what they're doing.
Before Michelle starts, can I actually ask though, what classes are you kind of incorporating these into? What kind of programs?
Yeah.
So nursing, yes, but
Yes. So within nursing, I teach in our health innovation and leadership doctoral track. So these are nurses who are getting their doctorate in systems leadership. Many of them go into executive positions, or really creative positions where they're designing these new pop-up clinics or these new mobile clinics. Really just innovative group of people. And I teach about regenerative health system design, but they also are studying global health, partnership programs, concepts of boundary spanning. Um, I also teach our population, public, and planetary health course that all of our doctoral students have to take, and leadership within our undergraduate programs. And then these immersive learning experiences are open to all undergraduate and graduate students. So we've had combinations of nurses, physicians, social workers, mortuary sciences, statisticians, engineers of all sorts, um, economists, and everything kind of in between, occupational therapists, physical therapists. And it is so beautiful to have them all together in the same space working on, let's say, these wicked issues. And they all have a totally different perspective. And so the creativity and how they connect and relate with one another is just a really beautiful human thing that I do believe the future design for how we emerge through this in a healthier way is going to require of us. And that I do also teach an interprofessional course on nature's rights, which is a small group currently of physicists, economist, pre-med, and social work students.
Very cool. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like I have a lot of hope for future fields of health after seeing what you are part of and what you're building, Angelica, and what the people around you are building. It's just incredible. Um, I think the question was something about like how have I been involved in community engaged teaching and learning from the jump or something like that?
Yeah, so what is your experience with
Oh,
teaching and specifically
sure.
around climate change and health, and what's your approach to community engaged teaching and learning?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. I began piloting environmental justice teaching from the Gender, Women, Sexuality Studies program. That's my master's and PhD background, which throws some people off. But back then, environmental justice wasn't a formal field. The discipline. There was scholarship that was building in the field, but there were very few, if any, formal programs in the early aughts. And so I had to kind of go where the practitioners were, and it's a very interdisciplinary field, which is cool. So that's why I landed there. And probably around 2016 or 2017, the Sustainability Studies program adopted my environmental justice course, and it was the first EJ course in the entire U of M system. And so that was almost 10 years ago. And like long before environmental justice became an academic field, same thing with climate justice, is even newer. It was and has always been a frontline grassroots movement. And
Mhm.
so there is really no way to teach it without it being community engaged. It had to be from the get-go. It had to be conceived that way. Um, and in fact, if I can just throw a little shade for a moment, sometimes, professors have to like review syllabi from, departments and disciplines from across the university to make sure that there's not a lot of content overlap. And I'll get syllabi from other professors. This has happened a couple of times, and there's no readings from by people of color. There's no readings from movement leaders. There's no connection to off-campus community. There's no student project work that should be like funneling labor and knowledge into the movement. It's really just kind of a traditional colonial way of imagining an entire movement, and I think it really does an injustice to the movement. So within the limits and the confines and the frustrations of being in this institution, we really try to do our best to be a community engaged course and increasingly program. And this has brought, us to a variety of places, especially around the Twin Cities for place-based and experiential learning. But maybe more importantly, we've every single semester developed really cool, exciting projects, either fully developed or co-developed with off-campus community partners. And that has looked like something different every single time the course is taught. It could be developing like a resource map. It could be starting a brand new campaign from the ground, and getting the letters to the editor and the legislative testimony and social media campaigns off the ground for like last semester we worked with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light to develop their climate insurance consciousness raising program work. This year, students are developing a Solar Cub curriculum for Native Son, and they're coming up with their own units for middle schoolers and kind of learning about the teaching practice and how to incorporate climate justice and Indigenous sovereignty. So it looks like a lot of different things. Campus teach-ins, it kind of depends on the moment and what our partners need. Um, and then I will say that like partnerships begin on the ground. I don't know that I've ever had a partnership begin in the institution. It's all been from the frontline organizing that either I or my partners have been part of for over a decade. And so, these kinds of like project-based work, project-based teaching really begins in relationship, in community. The trust already has to be there because academia is not necessarily a well-respected and trusted place to work or for people to trust. So a lot of it has to be from person to person, and they have to know you and trust you and that you're going to show up and deliver on what's been promised. So there's been a lot of learning and a lot of really just diverse, creative projects. Sometimes it looks like just hands-on labor. Like sometimes growers just need work to get done on a farm. And so that's what we do. We show up to an urban garden, we get work done. Sometimes it looks like producing climate research for urban farming, right? Like we have all of these scholarly tools, let's harness it. Sometimes it looks like fundraising. So whatever we can do to like harness the resources of higher ed and redistribute those right back into climate justice movements, food justice movements, EJ. That's really one of the major goals of every course that I teach.
And can you tell us a little bit more, so the level and what kind of courses and how those have kind of related to the topics that you're kind of teaching as well?
Oh, so I only work with undergrads for the most part. I mean, sometimes a grad student will want to take a course and then we like arrange upper level content and, learning outcomes for them. But by and large, most of my work has been with undergrads, whether it's through the U of M or through other places that I've been employed with. And how that shapes things. One idea, because I've never thought about it this way before, is that I think my experience of undergrads is that they are willing and excited to experiment with different kinds of methods of learning. They are action focused. They know they are very aware. At least this generation of people seem to me very much more aware of problems and issues facing our localities, our nation, our planet. But they don't necessarily yet know how to plug in to get to affect change. And so we work a lot on that. Whereas I suppose maybe just from my own experience in graduate school, people maybe tend to be focused more on their own particular research or on their career goals. So reaching people or capturing people, working with people at this level of development often yields, I think, really kind of creative and dynamic results. That's been my experience in working. I love undergrads.
Mhm.
I'm sure grads are awesome
Honestly.
too.
We love them all.
I am curious, how do you guys translate community engaged teaching or community engagement as a practice in your classes as important related to your subject specifically? So like the subjects that you teach. So with nursing, I imagine there's a lot around kind of public health, but I'm curious, Dr. Garvey, kind of what that looks like with translating community engaged teaching into the subject areas that you look at and how you kind of pose those to undergrads.
I hope I'm understanding the prompt correctly, but we work hard in the beginning of this semester to do a lot of framing around power.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
climate justice, environmental justice, these are there's not only a whole history to these movements, but there's theory, right? We have like our own theories, we have our own ideas and ideas of like methods and how to implement them, and they align. And so it's a pretty easy jump to make to suggest that the methods we're going to use in a course align with the theories and the histories and the philosophy that we just learned a couple of weeks ago. Like, okay, we know there are power asymmetries in the following intersectional ways. We've done all of these case studies. Now, how does the movement make change? What are the tactics? What are the strategies? Can we wrestle with some of them? Can we experiment with them? Can we like manipulate some of them? And maybe along the way, you'll see that you love, uh, radical organizing, you love writing, or you love producing art, or you love, getting your hands in the dirt and doing restoration. All of it's great, all of it's needed. We need all of us because we all have different skills and whatnot. So that's a pretty easy, you know, I don't know. I might be projecting, and maybe people don't think it's that easy of an alignment. But I think if we do a good job, kind of scaffolding this idea that these power asymmetries exist, here's the history and the politics of all of that. I think, I mean, it works well to get students on board with the idea that they can play a role through this partnership, through this project to make something happen. And sometimes it can even go on their resume, or sometimes where there's always like co-benefits that become of it, just to speak a little climate talk, right? Like sometimes they're not already like they can graduate networked with people doing the work, entrepreneurs doing the work, farmers doing the work. So I would say that, yeah, as a teacher, I really try to like hone those connections between what we do and how we do it. And now let's actually do it with the people who know, right? Like with the knowers who have the knowledge. Let's do it together and produce something. And in the process, we are redistributing those power asymmetries.
Thank you, guys. So I am curious, we're talking kind of broadly about community engaged teaching right now, and it's a little bit kind of abstract, but, for folks that are wanting to kind of incorporate community engaged teaching into their practice, their teaching practice, what kind of methods and best practices have you picked up along the way that you're like, oh my gosh, like you need to know this before you start? I would love some kind of guidance.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to piggyback on just kind of follow up from where we left off with Michelle's answer on the last question and just say like I echo all of that. And I think, one of the critical things is recognizing that learning as we do in these classrooms today is very unnatural, right? It's a very unnatural format of learning information. And it's not the way humans have evolved with their relationship to knowledge and wisdom, which once upon a time happened in community, in village, in migration, in hunting and gathering, in all of the things we had to do in relationship with our curiosity and our sense of wonder, touching things, smelling things, burning practices, whatever it was, we were in this deep, intimate way of knowing life, world, health, relationship, stewardship, tending, care, and all of that has shifted. And so now there's this dissonance that exists. And let's focus on undergrad since that's the population we were talking about. I agree, their neural pathways are wired differently right now, right? As far as like the awareness and the interconnectedness of all of these systems complexities. And that's epigenetics, that's evolution, that's good. That means evolution is still happening. That's wonderful. They give me so much hope because of their capacity to do that. And also they know that they're experiencing this social distance. Like they know that they have social anxiety. They know that technology has kind of interfaced into their development, and that it has changed attention spans, right? All of our attention spans has shortened our capacity to pay attention. Um, our our structure of our society by design doesn't, in this country, does not warrant or value, let's say, mindfulness or meditation practices or healing justice practices, restoration practices. And those are critical qualities to any healthy ecosystem. This constant productivity, rapid speed learning, this overstimulation of information consumption, it affects the internal environment just like it's affecting our external environment. And that changes brain pathology, right? That changes the amount of blood flow that you have getting to the prefrontal cortex, which is what you need to be able to connect and to be able to experience emotions and compassion. Um, and so knowing all of that and echoing what Michelle has shared, that was kind of like my journey of discovery coming into academia from being more in the community and practicing nursing at the bedside and on the grounds as a public health and community nurse and a disaster response nurse, and then getting here and I'm like, wow, the energy. Everyone is like up in the head all the time. Like it never stops. The projects, the scholarship, the writing, the publishing, the curriculum, this, that. And I was like, we just all need to like touch the earth and like play in the soil. And that's what I want my students to be able to do. And I studied holistic health. That's what my DNP was in. I studied integrative medicine. And at that juncture in my life of learning from traditional Chinese medicine epistemologies, Ayurvedic epistemologies, Native Indigenous Hawaiian healing philosophies, all these things at the same time, I was like, when you get to the root of these diverse cultural ways of knowing, it's always about humans' relationship with the earth and trying to understand it. Yoga practice is a balance of like hot and cold, a balance of knowing the seasons, understanding relationship with the lunar cycle and how it affects the water and the moon, and knowing that you are also, I mean, the water and knowing that you are also that. And so coming into the classroom, I was like, what do we do to just completely change how we teach in this space, especially leadership, which has everything to do with their own understanding or our own understanding of the role of sustaining our well-being in our capacity to lead. And that requires a fundamental practice of awareness and intention. That requires a fundamental practice of relationship and the ability to connect with oneself. And so it just kept getting deeper and deeper. And we actually published this framework that we call the eco-social partnership framework for teaching and learning. And it kind of offers up this invitation for us as educators to center on what does it mean to create a regenerative learning environment or a learning environment where life can emerge, all these diversities of life and their different ways of knowing, their different cultural backgrounds, the various strategies that they will take from this concept and then go and do. And if we study and remain curious on how we create that psychologically safe environment with practices that build that structure where students feel comfortable to be themselves and to ask weird questions, and faculty feel comfortable to not be perfect and to be ourselves, and we're just humans with each other. Engaging in a shared learning experience. And so when we can embody that, design that type of space, a lot of beautiful holistic things can occur. And it becomes this kind of like roundabout circularity or this circular experience where you can integrate these short somatic or mindfulness practices into the classroom to be able to invite that connection to happen so that whatever the curriculum is about is more fruitful. It'll actually land in the body of the student. How do we create opportunities for them to experience love, experience sadness, experience working through frustration. So a lot more simulated learning opportunities, right? Conflict resolution strategies, providing them with like real world situations that they will have to face and figure out as we once did when we were out in the world and not in these little virtual boxes all the time or in a classroom with a lecture for 2 hours. And so just really trying to be creative about what are all of the mechanisms that foster that social sense of cohesion. And a lot of that is the arts. So we have students do we always have art activities in every classroom. Just to get into the right brain for a little while before we go back into the left brain, creating some balance in their internal system. We try to make it playful as well. I mean, curiosity and play and seeing the world through more youthful eyes, I think is a critical intervention for how we actually get back to collectively, socially caring about the earth to prevent the crisis that we're in. And so with our younger and younger generations, I hope to see us doing a lot more of that. And they are some of the best people to learn from in order, again, how to do that. So also inviting that co-creation process as well, not having to have the answers on what method will work, but actually inquiring from the students, what do they want to do? How do they want to learn in order to experience some of those things? And I'm going to pass it to Michelle to share as well, but I'll drop that a link to that framework in the chat so people can access it if they'd like to.
Great, I want to see that. Yeah, well, in terms of methods, man, I love so many of the ones that you were suggesting, Angelica. Climate justice is it's decolonial, both in its aims, like what we seek to achieve, and in its methods, right? So I try seek to mirror and model that for classroom coursework as well, right? Like let's experiment with decolonial methods. And more could be said on that. And I'll pop a link into the chat too that does explain more of this reasoning. But um, you know, it's not to say that just because a method or methodology occurs in academia that it's automatically colonial or white supremacist. It might be, but it kind of depends on how it's done and what the aims are, what it produces and for whom, right? But meanwhile, there are so many other kinds of methods that we do suppress in higher education, including a lot of the ones that Angelica was mentioning. So I really love and try to encourage students to experiment with different environmental and climate justice methods of knowing, including feeling, tasting, dancing, paddling, bicycling, playing. We focused in on playing, like you said, Angelica. What else? Oral histories and oral storytelling, ancient practice of knowledge sharing, right? Crafting. So there's so many ways to produce learning and knowledge that exists across cultures and across time, but we have such a narrow, definition or idea of how to produce good knowledge in higher education. And so I try to push against that a little bit. And again, I think as I mentioned before, there are so many knowers and knowledge keepers that for all kinds of reasons are not working and practicing on campus. We need to go to them, right? We need to partner with them in order to learn more about those knowledges and that knowledge production and how to do it and yeah. So community engagement is really kind of foundational to this kind of expanded decolonial approach to these methods, right? And then I think you also asked on best practices, and Angelica focused on the importance of co-creation. And I would just echo that too. Like it has to be co-creation all the way down. Every course project or partnership, it begins with co-creating or co-imagining together. Sometimes, oftentimes long in advance, like before the course even starts, because these partnerships have to be started, the ideas have to happen, the schedule has to be made, money has to go out, right? Like so there is a lot of labor sometimes beforehand. Other times there's like emergent things that come up. For example, I remember in 2019, I had, a potential partnership project all teed up, but then we heard all about the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal dropped, and we're like, what is this? We really need to wrap our brains around this. We have to respond to this. And so we had to pivot, and the students came up with something entirely different and invited so many different off-campus community knowers to this campus teach-in on the Green New Deal, and the whole semester became about that. So sometimes we do have to be nimble. That's a part of the process. But, regardless of when it happens, that co-ideation happens first, and that begins in relationship, excuse me, where trust already exists. And then I would say there's like has to be some process of honoring, and that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like honorariums and compensation. Like we are compensating you for your time and your knowledge. Sometimes you have to take off of work or off of your caretaking duties to meet with us. We acknowledge that. Sometimes it's a promise of certain research or student labor that we can commit to. Sometimes it's a platform, it's an amplification. It depends on what it is, but there has to be some kind of honoring in that in how this all kind of works out. I'd say transparency is a third really important ingredient, like being transparent with our partners about the time crunches we're in, because in academia, we work on a totally different schedule than organizers work on, and vice versa. Being transparent about budget constraints, if there are, transparent about expectations. So communication is a fourth vital, best practice. Putting in those check-ins, pivoting or pausing if things don't feel right, or if a mistake has been made, showing accountability for that mistake, rectifying, doing some repair around that mistake. And then finally, I would just say, like, depending upon what the project is and who it's being conducted with, I think about this as like follow through and future making, like deliver on what's been promised and what the original conception was or the co-conception was. And if it's not a discrete project, it's something that's ongoing, make sure that there are systems set up for when the semester is over, when the year is over, or the fiscal year is over, or whatever, after closeout, so that the work keeps going and it doesn't just die, the relationship doesn't just die, the funding doesn't just die or dry up because you've overpromised and underdelivered, or your schedule has moved on. Theirs might not have. So I think there really has to be a lot of forethought and respect for where both parties are at, for something to be kind of mutually beneficial. Actually, maybe not even mutually beneficial. I really do see like higher ed as like a hoarding of power and resources. So I'm really more about like offloading and redistributing that power into the movement. So it isn't necessarily equal, right? This journey toward equity. I'll stop there.
Can I just say, I love the idea of reframing it as like a redistribution of power. Like that is gonna sit with me today for sure. Okay, so we can open it up for questions. So if folks do want to submit questions, feel free to do so. And we'll just continue kind of having a conversation from here. I have written down some questions for folks. So Dr. Walton in particular, so EJ, as we all know as EJ scholars, a lot of the folks that are kind of at the front lines of kind of identifying some health inequalities are oftentimes educators, nurses, mothers, and things like that. How do you prepare nurses for those kinds of leadership kind of positions and roles that they might take on, where there's a lot of emotional labor that might come out of some kind of environmental injustice?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question, and so true. And I would just add before I go into that, that I mean that was a big part of my lived journey that led me to the work that I do right now. I grew up in New Orleans, climate right on the front lines of climate disaster, poverty, you just very, very oppressed social, political norms that create these poverty pockets. Um, kind of a very disconnected community from the land because of some of that oppression over the course of time. And the people were sick. The comorbidities of the patient population that I cared for in New Orleans, which I had never, that's where I started as a nurse in a trauma ICU at a level one trauma center in New Orleans. And I had no idea that it was abnormal until I left and went to, well, I came to Minnesota next. And the patient ratios, just the complexity of patient conditions was so much less. And I was like, wow. I had no idea um, how much of a physiologic impact and how steeped these inequities um, are within the system. And then when COVID came around, and there's a lot of things that happened in between that, but I'm going to jump. I'm going to time jump here. When COVID came around, I went back to ICU work and I traveled the country and I worked in health systems all over the country. And these steeped health inequities were so visceral and so evident, and it was very eye-opening to bear witness to the mortality indifference across BIPOC populations from COVID, just the level of care, the treatment, all of it. It made me so sick. And I wanted to quit. I wanted to leave nursing altogether. I just wanted to, my hope in humanity at that juncture was like, I don't know where we're going. And I had to take time off. And I lived outside for 8 weeks in a rooftop car tent and just restored my own spirit by being in relationship with the land. And it was in doing that that I was like, oh my gosh, this is some of the most critical work and foundational work to ensure that the future workforce of nurses and physicians and everyone who's on the front lines of doing this are prepared for. And I started doing what I called healing the healer events, where I was taking multiple different disciplines out onto the St. Croix River once I made my way back to Minnesota after 2 years of doing that frontline work. And it was all about this restoration component and how do we actually teach the competency and the value to care for self in order to do this work that we love to do. And it's a juxtaposition. It's very hard for us to wrap our mind around caring for self before being able to care for others, because we just kind of jump into that mode of service. And beyond healthcare professionals, many disciplines too, right? We all, if you're a service-oriented leader in person, you're someone who cares about the environment, you're someone working in environmental justice in any way, shape, or form, you are that, right? You are a steward, you're a tender. And in order for us to do that, we have, I think, done a much better job over the last few years about figuring out where we can be intentional in introducing how self-value, self-worth, understanding power, understanding influence, understanding sustainability through the lens of one's internal system and internal alignment with external systems, how all of that plays a role within our capacity to care and to tend and to participate in sustainability practices and to be able to continue doing our work within the role. And so we have it woven throughout our curriculum, but then we also have all of these community oriented, less structured academically spaces for students to come together on some of this service learning, to be with one another, to go out onto the lakes and the rivers, be in kayaks, be on the water, be in just a natural way of recognizing like I am a human, I only have so much capacity. I have to value taking care of myself. I have to figure out what that is. There is no generalized standard blueprint. And there's also a level of like responsibility in doing that, that I think we all have to know and feel as well. And so that becomes once you see it as a sense, as a responsibility that we have, then comes the knowing oneself journey that you go on bioregionally. What foods and what culture and what traditions do matter to me based on what I know about my heritage or where I come from, where my people come from, where I grew up, what environment I'm in now. What makes me feel regulated and grounded versus what gives me more energy. And meditation is not it for everyone. Some people have a busy mind and they need to run in order to actually slow down. Some people need to slow down in order to be able to be energized. And so it's not a journey that any of us can go on for the other. It is one that we have to embrace and take responsibility and accountability to go on for ourselves so that we can be good stewards for one another. And so we have that woven in from beginning to the end, to also our alumni engagements. And it's in our pillars, it's in our mission, it's in our visions. And so our students are very privy to the fact that that is a core value system, um, of what it means, to be a nurse or to be a health professional or to be someone engaged in environmental justice work. And there's actually been a lot more movement globally with this as well. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Inner Development Goals through the United Nations. So similar, I'm sure many have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are our benchmarks and our metrics that we never meet because they're a structure. But they also have developed these inner development goals, which kind of hones us into the role that this piece plays in the greater sustainability efforts that we desire for. And just last week, the president of the University of Minnesota signed what's called the Okanagan Charter, which is an international policy essentially that our university is committing to rethinking the way we evaluate success, right? And that well-being will be a cornerstone of that well-being of our students and our faculty and our staff. And so when you start to reshape policies that actually change the way you evaluate and measure success, then that is kind of the direction that I think, a lot of this work, that environmental justice work, climate work, needs to also see in the near future. Obviously, we are under difficult strains in the current landscape of that. But when we can start to reshape those policies and rethink what matters actually, what is value to us, and it's not always economic growth. And actually, if we have health and well-being growth as a priority, the economic growth will come and it'll actually be greater. And so that gives me a lot of hope to see institutions, even like academia, adopting that type of global policy to rethink the way we're doing some of those things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Michelle, I'm going to pose the question that Kathy had put in the chat to you. So how do swings in politics, as we have experienced over the last decade in particular, affect the way you teach and how you teach it? Also, how do students show up differently in your courses through those political swings? How do you cope in that context?
Hi, Kathy. Good to see you, or
Fine
not see you, but
question.
hear from you. Um, yeah, I mean, in teaching environmental justice, it has only been swings in politics for the past decade, right? So yeah, there has, hey Kathy, yeah, this has always existed, and I think it's always really meant tuning in to the particular cohort that defines each year, each semester. There's a different energy that every cohort brings. Every teacher knows that, right? And then they're always responding to what's being leveled against them, what's been being leveled against us. And so I would say I think it's really important to be responsive, to acknowledge news head on. And so I'm bringing in headlines every day, almost every day to class, taking a moment to pause when something big or bad especially has happened, and we need to take a moment to kind of like think through it or even grieve that together. And then I would say that, you know, in and then we respond, like we try to move forward in light of that context. So for example, a few years ago, or maybe it was like 4 years ago now, the Inflation Reduction Act passed. That was like, you know, it unleashed some of the biggest climate and environmental justice funding that the US has ever seen. Those were totally different flush times than they than today, right? And so just like we did when the Green New Deal was proposed, we decided to respond to the IRA that semester, and the students wanted another teach-in, but we did it from a more critical perspective where we're like, all right, everybody's championing all of, you know, this great like unleashing of funds and money, but what's really going on, and what does a critical environmental justice perspective think about that? And that really complicated the IRA as being like the pinnacle of what we can achieve in climate politics, right? It really like it was a huge learning opportunity for us to dive deep into that funding and figure out who was harmed and who was helped and tease that apart. So, and that was during, you know, I look back really fondly on those years, especially as my people and I mourn the loss of a lot of progress and funding that the IRA unleashed, that we no longer have access to. But these days, we're in a totally different climate, as all of you know and probably struggle with day to day. For example, you know, we just opened the boundary waters to a Chilean mining company just today. We lost that by 1 vote. So, man, we're just getting hit all the time, right? And I think it is even more important in those contexts to not just to slow down and to listen to one another. Students are very wise. They actually want to listen to what their peers are saying, and they will look to me as somebody who's been in this for some modeling or some ideas of how to work through it. I really believe that action is a salve for despair, and so we spend a third to a half of the entire semester looking at environmental justice methods in a very engaged way and learning how to approach social change, how to affect social change. Here's a toolkit. So when they're leaving the course or they're leaving the University of Minnesota, they're equipped with an arsenal of different strategies and logics that they can try depending upon, you know, the applicability to the context. And then they've had some experience experimenting with a couple of those in the class, right? And I hope that leaves them feeling more empowered and emotionally equipped to handle the violence and the grief that most of us are experiencing, some more than others, right now. So, yeah, so that's how I would approach that, Kathy. Is such a good question, something I think about all the time, and I bet many of you do too. And then you also said, how do you cope in that context? Honestly, this helps me cope. Like being in community, working with off-campus partners that are on the front lines of leading these EJ initiatives and movements. We've got hunger strikers right now on the 7th day of their hunger strike, trying to shut down the Herc incinerator. And they were just in class with us last week. That inspires me. That keeps me going. Being in touch with students who want to be change makers helps me cope in that context.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. So we are at the time, and so I am going to invite Dr. Walton as well to kind of add a response of how do you cope if you want to kind of throw your hat in the race. Mine is crafting, so I'm not sure what you're.
Well, I'll echo both of your responses. Like Michelle said, it's the work, it is the people I work with, it is the things that are happening that does help me cope, being engaged. And also crafting. I love to craft as well. I'm a painter. I do a lot of painting. I'm an ambivert, so I need to balance the social, the being in collectivism with my internal time to. I just took up knitting, so I've been doing a lot more knitting.
Nice.
And just valuing my own energy and time. Um, I continue to try and get better and better at saying no to things that I need to say no to so that I have the capacity and the space for the things that I really deeply care about and the groups of people I want to deeply care about. And I think that that should be an invitation for all of us because we're constantly trying to do so much because there's so much to do. But also knowing that it's okay to say no sometimes so that you can show up whole and present and engaged and not be spread too thin. So, yes, all of those things. And right now, oh, and my animals. Big thing. My two little cats and
Oh, nice.
my husky. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I want to remind folks that we have one more session coming up, and we will be focusing on climate hope. We're going to be led by an instructor of dance. She's an assistant professor. And so hopefully we'll get some movement in as well. And so I hope folks will join us for that. Brianna, do you have anything else?
Yeah, so we at the end of this series, we are going to be creating a knowledge hub, and we are in the process of collecting resources. So I'm going to drop a form in the chat if you would like to share resources. You can fill out the form. I also grabbed the stuff that our panelists shared in the chat, and we'll make sure to include those in our knowledge hub as well. But just wanted to give you folks a chance to grab that. And yeah, that's all I had.
All right. Thank you guys so much. And thank you for an amazing talk. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.